Good morning, church. Good morning. We're going to do it a little bit differently today. We're going to bring out Laverne's whiteboard. So we're going to see how this works. There's no print button on it, and there's no spell check button, so I'm really going to be in trouble. For some reason, it's a lot harder to spell on a whiteboard than it is everywhere else. So we'll give this a try. When I was growing up, there was a Bible preacher, and he used to use those overhead projectors with like the little clear films. And I used to love that. And I don't know if it's maybe just because that's the way my mind thinks in kind of like a mind mapping flow chart kind of style, but that's what we're going to go with today. So, what we're going to talk about this morning is we're going to talk about evangelism. And this isn't a new topic, right? I'm sure that you've heard a lot of sermons about evangelism. And a lot of the sermons maybe that you've heard talk about the why behind it. Why should we evangelize? Because of the love that we have for God, that we want to share with other people, our love for humanity, it being the biggest decision that someone will ever make in their life, the why it's so important to do that. A lot of other messages about evangelism that you may have heard have been that talk about the tools or maybe the strategies of evangelism. So this one might be like Bible studies or the steps to salvation, how to talk to somebody about the Bible, inviting them to gospel meetings, maybe doing street preachings, things like that. The tools and the strategies of evangelism. But when I think about this, I think that there's a really big gap between these two things. And that's what I want to talk about today, is how to start a spiritual conversation with people. And I think that's what brings this together. I might have the why, I might understand why this is important for me to do that. And I might have some really great tools or strategies that like, okay, I've got this. But how do I get the plane off the ground? And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how do we start a spiritual conversation with people. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at two Bible passages today to kind of give us a perspective or a lens on which that we want to view that, how to start a spiritual conversation with someone. And then I want to share with you something personally that I've been doing that I've actually found that works. And it's really, really easy. It's actually something that you're kind of already almost doing, but just with a twist. So it's very, very simple. Now, I'm an introvert. I don't like standing up in front of people and speaking. I don't like when the spotlight's on me. I'm not a big fan of crowds. And a lot of times when I think about evangelism, I get a bit of a pit in my stomach, right? Like, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? I don't know. And what we're going to talk about today is something so easy that even an introvert can do it. All right, so before we dive into this how-to, let's open up our Bibles to Matthew 13. Matthew 13, we're going to do a little bit of reading about the parable of the sower. Starting in verse 1. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it, while all the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, A farmer went out to sow his seed, and as he was scattering his seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on the rocky places, where it did not have much soil, sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plant. Still other seed fell on the good soil, where it produced a crop, 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. The disciples came to him and asked, how do you speak to the people in parables? If you skip over to verse 18, Jesus explains the parable. He says, listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown to the hearer. This is the seed sown along the path. The one who received the seed that fell on the rocky place is the man who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since he has no root, he lasts only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, he quickly falls away. The one who received the seed that fell among the thorns is the man who hears the word, but the weariness of life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it, making it unfruitful. But the one who received the seed that fell on good soil is the man who hears the word and understands it. He produces a crop yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what it was sown. So when we read this, a lot of times we think about this as the parable of the soils, right? I mean, and that's what it is. But this morning I want to look at the farmer. So maybe just a little bit of a different focus this morning. And when you picture this parable, in verse 4, mine says, as he was scattering the seed. So he's out here, in my mind, walking along the seed, or walking along broadcasting his seed, right? Like, you know, and back then they didn't have no John Deere, like this is John's feet, right? Like, but they knew how to farm, right? Like that's not like this new invention. We've been farming for thousands of years. But isn't it kind of odd how he was farming? Like he's just walking around throwing this seed wherever. And you know, our modern days of farming, we take all this time. We prep the soil, we till the soil, we plant these nice little rows, and then we've got these machines that, you know, that drop all the seed and everything like that in these perfect little rows. But it's kind of interesting that I'm sure they would have farmed the same way, but that's not what the farmer did here. Kind of interesting. I mean, and seed was expensive too, right? Like it had great cost. So why was the farmer just walking around throwing seed where 3/4 of the seed didn't even make it in the good ground? The farmer lost 3/4 of his crop. But we don't see here that the farmer was upset. And it's interesting that Jesus uses this as the parable of the sower, and he doesn't call it the parable of the archer. What I mean by that is he didn't say this. There once was an archer who had 3 arrows in his quiver. He pulled one out, strung it in his bow, and held it there and waited till the optimum conditions were met, that there was no wind, and then at the precise moment, he let it go and it struck his target. Doesn't say that. But isn't that kind of how we evangelize people? We sit there like a Marine sniper in a ghillie suit waiting for 3 days. And here we are. I mean, we could be waiting days, weeks, years before we pull the trigger because we say, well, they're not ready. I'm not ready. They wouldn't be interested. Right? Like, we run through this huge checklist before we pull the trigger. That's not what Jesus says. He's out here letting it rip. Are we doing that same thing? So, with that perspective, with that lens, I want us to think about how are we starting a spiritual conversation with people. So, my job background, a lot of you know my 9-to-5 job. I work at home. I work for a health insurance company. And when I took that job 3 years ago, I really thought about, okay, how am I going to spread the gospel with people that I have on Zoom calls or I'm on chat with all day? I mean, we don't really even pick up the phone and call each other. And there was a small team of 3 of us, so it was a really small group. But I was thinking, okay, well, you know, how am I going to do this? Because in previous jobs, face-to-face jobs, you're able to have conversations with people and things like that, and it kind of, springs up and things. But how am I going to do that remotely? I got a person that lives in Connecticut and one that lives in Phoenix. Like, how am I going to do that? So I was thinking, okay, well, what I can do is I want to tell them that I go to church, that that's something important to me. And that way they'll kind of start to see that, okay, I'm a Christian. But, I don't want to do it in a way of like, well, look at me, I go to church, right? But I want them to see like this is something important. So I thought about, okay, well, how do you do that? Like, how can I bring that up? I'm not just, hey, I went to church today. It's not going to be weird. So how do you do that? And I was thinking about there's something that we all do that we love to talk about. And this was the perfect vehicle. The weekend. We love to talk about the weekend, right? Either your past weekend you just had, or your upcoming weekend. We'd love to talk about this, right? The world loves to talk about this. This is such an easy segue for us, right? What'd you do last weekend? Well, I mowed the lawn, I painted the bathroom, I watched the Packers, right? Like, whatever it is, we talk about this, we understand this. And I thought, okay, here's my opportunity just to sprinkle in. I did all these things, and I went to church. That's it. I wasn't going to say, can I tell you about a 5-step Bible study I'd like to have with you? No. I'm just going to sprinkle that seed. I went to church. And I wanted to see what would happen. And it was funny because it actually worked. Right? Like our ideas work sometimes. And this isn't like a bold idea. This isn't like a new idea. Again, like it's just a simple thing with a twist, but it was surprising that it opened up spiritual conversations that people had. I found out where they went to church. I found out about kind of what they believed. I had one of my coworkers, like I said, there was only 3 of us. She messaged me one time and said, would you mind if we talked about what the Bible had to say about divorce? She was a divorced person. Yeah, okay. So we got to open up the Bible. I mean, she's in Phoenix. I'm in Appleton. But we got to see, okay, well, what does the Bible say about this? And it was amazing that just simply sprinkling that in, them understanding that that was important to me, who I was, that started to open up that door and how to start that spiritual conversation. I was just broadcasting the seed, simply talking about my weekend. A few weeks ago, I had a door salesman come by. We're looking for a new front door. So I had a salesman come by, set up an appointment. And it was on Halloween. And he asked me, oh, hey, got any Halloween plans, right? And I was like, well, actually, I do. I was like, there's about 30 or 40 young adult families and kids from church that are coming over for a party tonight. And he's like, oh, really? Well, what church do you go to? I was like, oh, well, the little gray church, Church of Christ on Newberry Street. Oh, yeah, I know where that's at. I don't live far away. And again, just telling people that opens up that door. So I'm calling this part, this weekend and church idea, step 1. And the goal of step 1 is just start. Just open up that door. And really just let that seed grow. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to follow up. You don't have to say anything else. This can be a simple strategy of step 1. But you can take this a little bit further, and we're going to dive into this a little bit more with step 2. Let's take a look at Acts chapter 17. Acts chapter 17, picking up in verse 16. So background real quick. So this is Paul's missionary journey. He's in Athens. Chapter 17, verse 16. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who had happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to dispute with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you're presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we want to know what they mean." All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Verse 22, Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' Now when you worship as something unknown, I am going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by hands, and he is not served by human hands, as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. From one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the time set for them and the exact places where they should live. God did this so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out to him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move in our being, as some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine, being like gold or silver or stone, an image made by man's design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, for he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to all men by raising him from the dead." So Paul started off by affirming them. I see everywhere that you guys are really religious. He didn't walk in and say, "Well, let me tell you why you're wrong," right? Which, he could have done. He met them where they were, and he started with them, not with him. He used their circumstances, their surroundings. He says your own poets, so he used a modern cultural reference. So again, looking at this for our next perspective for the lens in step 2. So if you want to take this a little further, you can ask the question, where do you go to church? So you can just leave this alone at step 1, and you can just sprinkle into your weekend story that you go to church. But if you want to take this a little further, after you start doing that, you can say, where do you go to church? Don't say, do you go to church? Because then that's a yes or no. That's not going to keep a conversation going. You want to say, where do you go to church? And they're either going to answer in the affirmative or the negative, right? They're either going to say, oh yeah, I go to XYZ church down the road. And what do you say then? You want to affirm and follow up. So when they tell you that in the affirmative, you're going to say, that is great. Nice. Say something positive about that. That's great that you're going there. But then the follow-up question is, what drew you to that group? Or said another way, what do you like about that church? You want to start getting that conversation going. That's what step 2 is about. The goal here is get a conversation going. And this is where we've got to listen. We've got to be curious. I remember when I was taking a training class for counseling, they were talking about you got to wear your curious hat. And this is where our curious hat comes in. We're not listening so that we're waiting for our turn to talk. Like, we are listening because I want to know, great, you go to XYZ church. That's fine. What do you like about that? What drew you to them? Because I want to start hearing the things that we have in common. Paul started with the things they have in common. I don't want to say, what's that church's position on whatever doctrine, right? There's a time for that, but I don't believe this is the time. This is the time where I want to gain ground. I want to find the 50%, the 80%, the 90% of the things that we agree on so we can build a foundation together, and then we can talk about the important things. We can talk about maybe the doctrinal differences and what does the Bible say about that. But I want to know, I want to get them talking. What do you like about that group? Okay. Now, well, what if they answer in the negative? Like, okay, no, I don't go to church. Okay, well, now what? So we want to affirm and follow up again. I can respect that. I can respect that you don't go. Church can be very difficult for a lot of people. They have a reason why. And that's what you want to find out next. So after you can say that, I respect that. Going to church can be difficult for a lot of various reasons. Pause. Let there be a little bit of silence, because they might tell you the reason right there. They might say, well, I had this experience. Here it is. They might give you that reason. And again, be curious, listen, not to answer, but listen to know them, to understand them. What's that reason for them, why they don't go? Okay, so pause. Let's say that they don't fill the silence, right? Okay, it's back to you. Back to your turn to talk. Well, what can you say? You can kind of do two ideas here. So you can tell them about your experience. What going to church or your relationship with God means to you. So that's one way that you can do it. You can give your story now a little bit. Why do you come? Why do you want that relationship with God? What has He done for you in your life? You can go that route, or you can just ask them, what experiences have you had that make you not want to go? You can simply ask that. They're probably going to tell you. People have a reason for things they do, right? We don't just do things really randomly. Like, church is a very polarizing issue. Religion is a very polarizing issue. We have an opinion on it. We've got a feeling on it that's deep, either for the positive or the negative. And again, we want to build that conversation here. Okay. The last step, if you want to take this one step further. Step 3, invite them to something. Invite them to some sort of follow-up. It can be a thing that we're doing at church. You can, hey, we've got a gospel meeting coming up. Hey, we've got a meeting on Wednesday. We go to church. Hey, let's just talk about this some more. When do you want to do that? You want to grab a cup of coffee? Invite them to something. Set up a follow-up so that you can talk about it more. And really, what that's doing is this is leading you now into this category. So now you're starting into, okay, the tools and the strategies, lessons that you've heard about how to share the gospel, the steps to salvation, having a Bible study with someone, inviting them to a gospel meeting. Here's where you get into the tools and strategies. But today I wanted to talk about this middle category. How do we just simply start? And I think we can start by talking about something that we already are doing, and simply just by inserting, I also went to church. If you want to take that further, after you start to get to know them a little bit more, you start sprinkling that in, you can say, where do you go to church? See what happens. Follow up there. Give them that opportunity for an invite. Step 3's goal is action. This, I think, is something that's really, really simple. You don't get a gold star if you all the way make it through step 3. Like, if you want to do just like step 1, that's great. Like, I think this can work, right? Like, this is just letting the seed do its work. The farmer wasn't out there. We didn't see that. Well, he was out there with a watering can every day, and he built a nice little shade so it didn't get in the storm. The seed, let God do the work. Our job is just to be sprinkling, right? Don't get discouraged. I think we get discouraged so much when we talk about evangelism that, this person, this relative, this friend, this family member of mine, I've been at it for years. They just don't seem to care. It's not going anywhere. That's not my job. That's God's job. That's his job. The Holy Spirit's working in their life, not me. But why do I sometimes put that pressure on myself? My job is just to do this wherever I go, right? Be human and just have a conversation with people. Tell them your story. Listen for their story. Listen, ask questions, be curious. So, tomorrow morning, people are going to ask you, how was your weekend? What did you do? So you've got a choice to make. You can either say the normal stuff, or you can say, I went to church. And this is a decision for us to make, right? Because it's easy, I'm just not going to say something, right? Like, the devil wants us to do that. That's the whole idea of you don't put a lamp under a bowl. Like, I think that's kind of the same idea here. Like, I'm just not going to say anything. It's a choice. We have a choice. When people ask us this question now, what am I going to say? What am I going to tell them about my weekend? What did I do? So that choice is going to be yours tomorrow. So if you do one simple thing, see if you can add this into your new week. Thank you.